The transmission came through every radio, television, and computer on Earth at the same moment. Admiral Hayes stood in the command center and watched the alien message play on all the screens around him. The vessel hung above the Indian Ocean. It was bigger than any ship humanity had ever built. It was bigger than entire cities. The voice that spoke was cold and without emotion. The alien did not sound angry or scared. It sounded sure of itself. It sounded like someone who had done this many times before and had never failed. I am Overlord of the Collective. Your world has been observed. Your people have developed weapons and technology. This makes you a problem we must solve. You will now surrender your planet to the Collective. Your leaders will step down. Your weapons will be destroyed. Your people will work for us. You have 72 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, we will kill every living thing on your world. Nothing will survive. You will have no choice. The message ended. It played again. It would play again and again for hours until every person on Earth heard it. Was a military man. He had spent 40 years serving his country. He had seen wars and conflicts and political troubles, but he had never heard anything like this. The alien was not asking. The alien was not trying to make a deal. The alien was giving an order to people who had no real choice. Around, his soldiers did not move. They did not speak. They simply stared at the screens. Some of them were thinking about their families. Some of them were thinking about their homes. All of them were thinking about death. The President of the United States was Warren. She had been president for 3 years. She was smart and tough, but she had never had to face anything like this. Within 1 hour of the transmission, she was in the White House Situation Room with the military leaders of every major nation on Earth. The leaders of Russia, China, Europe, and India were all on video screens. They all heard the same message. They all felt the same fear. The Chinese general spoke first. "We cannot fight this. Look at the size of their ship. We have no weapons that can reach it. We should consider the overlord's words. We should surrender and hope they keep us alive." The Russian general disagreed. "If we surrender, we lose everything. We lose our freedom. We lose our future. Our children will be slaves forever." The Indian representative said nothing at first. Then she spoke quietly. "They are wrong about us. They do not understand what we are." President Warren listened to them argue for several minutes. Then she stopped them. Her voice was calm, but it had steel in it. A steel that came from knowing her country and knowing her people. "I have a question for you all," she said. "How many wars have we fought on Earth? How many times have humans been told they would lose everything? How many times have we stood at the edge of death and found a way to survive?" No one answered. Warren continued. "The collective thinks they are talking to sheep. They think we will fold. They think we are weak because we are not them. They are making a mistake. I am going to give them an answer they do not expect." Warren turned to Admiral Hayes on the screen beside her. "Admiral, I am authorizing Operation Total Response. Every military asset, every scientist, every factory, every single resource we have, we need to prepare. We have 72 hours. I want to show that overlord what it means to threaten human extinction." Nodded. He had spent decades preparing for impossible situations. He had plans hidden in secret bunkers. He had weapons that very few people knew existed. He had been waiting for exactly this moment. "It will be done, Madam President," he said. Within the next hour, every military base on Earth received new orders. Soldiers who had been waiting in peace were suddenly given weapons and sent to new positions. Scientists who had been working on secret projects for years were told their work was now critical. Factories began to run 24 hours a day. Shipyards that had been quiet for years started building new ships. The governments of Earth made a choice that would either save them or destroy them completely. They decided to fight. Dr. Price was a scientist who had spent 30 years thinking about aliens. Other scientists had laughed at her. They said aliens were not real. They said the universe was too big and lonely for visitors to come, had never believed them. She had spent her whole career preparing for first contact. She had developed weapons systems. She had created defensive plans. She had written thousands of pages of theories about how to fight a superior force. Now she was called to the Advanced Defense Command in Colorado. She was told she had 72 hours to make her theories real. Went to work immediately. She gathered every scientist and engineer and programmer she knew. They worked without sleeping. They combined ideas from computer science, physics, and biology. They built systems that had never been built before. In factories across America and around the world, workers built weapons and defense systems. Drones were manufactured by the thousands. Missiles were assembled. Satellites were launched. Humanity was preparing to fight. The alien fleet moved into position around Earth. There were now 3 massive ships in orbit, not just one. The Overlord seemed confident. Why would they not? They had conquered 17 other worlds. Every one of those worlds had surrendered within hours. The collective had never lost a fight. They had never even come close. The Overlord did not understand humanity. The Overlord did not know that humans could work together when they were threatened. The Overlord did not understand that humans got stronger when they were backed into corners. The Overlord did not know that humans could create things and invent solutions that no other species had ever imagined. 2 days passed, then 3. The clock counted down to the deadline. 72 hours became 60 hours, 60 hours became 30, 30 hours became 10. Stood in the command center and looked at the alien ships hanging above Earth. Around him, 50,000 soldiers and scientists worked at computers and control panels. They were ready. They had prepared in ways the collective could not predict. They had built weapons that the collective did not know existed. They had created defense systems that used technology the collective had never seen. The deadline came. 72 hours had passed. The Overlord waited for Earth to surrender. The Overlord waited for the people of Earth to bow down and accept slavery. Instead, sent a message. His voice was steady and clear. I am Admiral Hayes of Earth. The first attack came exactly 1 minute after the deadline passed. Energy weapons that burned hotter than the surface of the sun came down from the alien ships. They hit the Earth like lightning. Buildings exploded. The ground shook. The Overlord was executing the sentence of total destruction. But the Overlord had made a fatal mistake. The Overlord thought Earth had only simple weapons. The Overlord thought they would attack from the sky without resistance. The Overlord did not know what was waiting for them in orbit. The response from humanity was instant and total. Thousands of weapons fired at the same moment. Kinetic strikes came from orbital platforms. Energy weapons that humanity had built in secret for years launched upward. Electromagnetic pulses spread across the sky like invisible waves. They disrupted the alien communications. They damaged the alien weapons. They turned the tide of battle in less than 60 seconds. The lead collective cruiser took a direct hit. Its shields, which were designed to protect against simple attacks, failed against the coordinated assault. The ship's hull breached. Fire spread through its interior. Aliens died by the thousands. Captain James Mitchell commanded the orbital defense station. He watched the displays as the alien fleet suffered damage after damage. His hands moved across the controls. His voice was calm as he issued orders. All platforms engage Target 2, disable their communications array, destroy their weapon systems, make sure they cannot call for help. Price sat in the command center in Colorado. Her fingers flew across holographic displays. She could see the entire battle from space. She could see the alien ships trying to move into better positions. She could see their weapons trying to find new targets. But at every turn, humanity was already waiting for them. Had studied the collective for years. She had looked at every piece of information about how they fought. She had analyzed their technology. She had found their weaknesses. The collective built weapons that were powerful but predictable. The collective thought in patterns. They had conquered so many worlds that they believed they understood how to fight all battles. Had made one assumption that changed everything. She assumed the collective would be confident. She assumed they would be arrogant. She assumed they would follow patterns that humanity could predict. She was right. Sarah was daughter. She was also a soldier. She commanded the Lunar Defense Station. She watched the battle from the moon as her father led humanity's forces. She watched as the collective fleet tried to retreat. She watched as the most powerful military force in the galaxy was slowly destroyed by an enemy they had underestimated. The Overlord tried to send a distress signal to the nearest collective installation at Jupiter, but had anticipated this. She had placed a satellite network in position to intercept any communication that tried to leave Earth's orbit. The signal was caught. The signal was analyzed. The signal was changed. The reinforcements that received the modified message would come to help their Overlord, but they would find something very different than what they expected. They would find a message from humanity. They would find proof that the collective could be defeated. The flagship of the Overlord took damage after damage. It was an ancient ship. It had conquered worlds for 200 years, but it had never faced an enemy like humanity. The alien ship's shields failed. The hull breached in multiple places. Fire spread through the corridors. The Overlord sent one final message. It was not a command. It was not an order. It was a question filled with disbelief. How could you possibly do this? We are superior. We have technology beyond your understanding. How could you defeat us? Answered personally. His voice came through the alien communication system. You made a mistake. You looked at us and saw weakness. You saw a young species that had not yet learned to fight. You saw beings that you could command. But you did not see humans. You did not understand what happens when we decide to survive. You did not know that we would be ready. The Overlord's flagship's core detonated. The explosion was bright enough to see from the ground. A miniature sun bloomed in Earth's orbit above the Indian Ocean. The ancient vessel that had conquered 17 worlds was destroyed. The Overlord and all of the command staff died in the days after the battle. The governments of Earth had to make decisions about what came next. The representatives of the 17 worlds that the collective had conquered sent messages asking for help. They wanted to know how humanity had prepared so completely. They wanted to know how they could fight back against the collective's remaining forces. President Warren called another meeting with the world leaders. This time, she was not asking what to do. She was telling them what would happen. We will help the liberated worlds, she said. We will send scientists and engineers to teach them about the defense systems we built. We will help them understand how to fight the collective. But we will not take control of their worlds. We will not tell them what to do. We will help them stand as equals. This was important. Humanity had just won a war against conquerors. It would have been easy to become conquerors themselves. It would have been easy to take control of the worlds that the collective had dominated. But Warren understood something important. Humanity's greatest strength was not military power. It was the ability to inspire other species to believe in themselves. Continued her work at the Advanced Defense Command. Now she was not building weapons for defense. She was teaching. Scientists from the liberated worlds came to Colorado, showed them how to build quantum encryption systems. She showed them how to create electromagnetic pulse weapons. She showed them how to coordinate defenses across entire planets. The knowledge spread through the galaxy. Within weeks, every liberated world had the ability to defend themselves. Within months, the collective's remaining forces knew that any attack would face coordinated resistance across multiple worlds. The collective began to fall apart. But not everything was celebration, had to deal with the aftermath of war. Soldiers who had fought in the battle against the alien fleet suffered from trauma. Some of them could not sleep. Some of them had nightmares about the violence they had witnessed. Visited them in hospitals. He listened to their stories. He did not tell them that the death they had caused was necessary. He simply sat with them and acknowledged their pain. Sarah worked in the hospital too. She helped the soldiers recover. She listened to them talk about the battle. She helped them understand that they had not chosen to be killers. They had chosen to be defenders. They had chosen to protect their world and their families. That was not the same as being a killer. It was different. It was necessary. The world came together in ways that had never happened before. Nations that had been enemies for centuries now worked as one unit. The United States and Russia cooperated on defense systems. China and Japan worked together on communications technology. India and Pakistan joined forces on weapons development. The Middle East sent scientists to work alongside European researchers. Humanity had always been divided. Different religions, different governments, different ideologies, but when threatened with extinction, those differences became small. When faced with an outside enemy that wanted to enslave the entire world, internal conflicts seemed insignificant. News from the galactic community came back to Earth. Other species that had never contacted humanity before were sending messages. They wanted to meet. They wanted to understand how a young species had defeated the collective. Some of them were curious. Some of them were frightened. Some of them wanted to form alliances. Received an invitation to speak before the Galactic Council. This was the first time in 3 weeks after the destruction of the Overlord's fleet. The United Nations called for a special session. This was not a meeting about politics or trade. This was a meeting to acknowledge what humanity had accomplished and to decide what came next. Representatives from every nation attended. They sat in the same assembly hall where humans had argued about borders and resources and differences for over 100 years. Now they sat together as one species. The gallery was filled with observers from the liberated worlds. These beings, who had been slaves just weeks before, now watched humans make decisions about their future. President Warren stood to address the assembly. Her voice was steady and strong. She did not speak about victory. She did not speak about conquest. She spoke about responsibility. "We have been given something that we did not ask for," she said. "We have been given the attention of the galaxy. We have been given the respect of species that are far older than us. We have been given the hope of worlds that have suffered under oppression. We must not waste this opportunity. We must not become the thing we fought against. We must show the galaxy that humans can be different. We can be strong and also just. We can be powerful and also merciful." She paused. She looked at the faces of the other representatives. She saw tears in some eyes. She saw determination in others. "We will not seek revenge against the collective for trying to destroy us. We will not invade their worlds. We will not try to conquer them. But we will help the worlds they oppress to become independent. We will help these species rebuild. We will help them become strong enough to protect themselves. And we will stand with them as equals, not as rulers." The assembly erupted in applause. The observers from the liberated world stood and shouted. They shouted in their own languages. They shouted words that had to translate, but the meaning was clear. They were grateful. They were hopeful. They believed that humanity had changed the future of the galaxy. Sarah received a promotion to admiral. She was now the youngest admiral in human history. Her father attended the ceremony. He placed the insignia on her uniform himself. When it was done, they embraced, felt tears in his eyes. His daughter had helped save the world. His daughter would help build the future. Received an invitation that shocked her. The Galactic Council asked her to join them. They wanted her to be the representative of humanity in the council chambers. This was an incredible honor, but was not sure she wanted it. She went to speak with President Warren about the offer. Warren told her something that would never forget. "You did not go to war because you wanted power or territory. You went to war because you wanted to protect people. That is the quality that the galaxy needs to see in humanity. If you go to the Galactic Council, do not go for glory. Go because you believe you can make things better. Go because you can help create a galaxy where species do not have to live in fear of conquest and enslavement. Go because you can show them what humanity really is." Accepted the invitation. She would become the first human member of the Galactic Council. She would sit with leaders from species that had existed for millions of years. She would speak with beings that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. And she would represent Earth and all the humans who had chosen to fight for freedom instead of accepting slavery. The collective did not fall quickly. It did not collapse all at once, but it fell inevitably. Conquered world after conquered world declared independence. They joined together to form a new alliance. They called it the Liberation Coalition, and they asked humanity to be part of it. Had to decide whether to accept this role. He was old now. He had spent his entire life serving his country. He had never expected to be asked to serve humanity's place in the galaxy, but he accepted. He became the military representative of humanity to the Liberation Coalition. He would help coordinate the defense of the liberated worlds. He would help ensure that the collective's oppression never returned. In the first year after the battle, the greatest changes happened in the human mind. Humans began to see themselves differently. They were not a young species waiting to be conquered. They were not a primitive culture waiting to be dominated. They were a species capable of extraordinary things. When 5 years after the Overlord's ship had hung above the Indian Ocean, Admiral Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Earth Station. This was the first major space station that humanity had built in cooperation with the liberated worlds. It orbited Earth at a distance that allowed it to see both the planet and the stars beyond. Was an old man now. His hair was white. His hands were thin and marked with age, but his eyes were still sharp. His mind was still clear. He looked out at the stars and thought about everything that had changed. Had become one of the most influential members of the Galactic Council. She had helped create laws that protected the rights of all species. She had worked to ensure that no species could ever gain the kind of power that the collective had had. She had become a symbol of humanity's commitment to justice and equality. Sarah had become the commanding officer of the Joint Defense Force of the Liberation Coalition. She worked with commanders from 17 different species. Together, they had created a military system that protected the freedom of all member worlds while preventing any one power from dominating others. President Warren had worked to transform Earth from a nation of divided countries into a unified world government. It took years of negotiation. It took compromise and sacrifice. But eventually, every nation agreed to join the United Earth government. Earth was no longer divided by borders and ancient conflicts. Earth was one world speaking with one voice. The liberated worlds had flourished. They had rebuilt their cities and their economies. They had regained their cultures and their traditions. Many of them had joined Earth and the other liberated worlds in forming a new alliance called the Free Worlds Coalition. This coalition of equals worked together to keep the peace and to ensure that no species could ever threaten another again. But the greatest change had happened inside humanity itself. Humans had learned that they could do extraordinary things when they worked together. They had learned that they were capable of defeating enemies that seemed impossible to overcome. They had learned that they could be strong without being cruel. They had learned that they could be peaceful, but also willing to fight for what mattered. Received a call from Sarah. She wanted to meet him at the observation deck. He waited for her there, looking out at the Earth below. His daughter arrived a few minutes later. She was dressed in the uniform of an admiral in the Liberation Coalition Defense Force. She was no longer just a soldier. She was a leader who was respected across the galaxy. They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Then Sarah spoke. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Do you ever wish we had surrendered instead of fighting?" Thought about the question carefully. He thought about all the soldiers who had died in the battle. He thought about all the alien beings who had been killed. He thought about the cost of the victory. "No," he said finally. "I do not regret it. We made the right choice. We could have chosen slavery. We could have chosen to bow down and accept whatever the Overlord wanted. But we chose freedom instead. We chose to fight for ourselves and for all the worlds that the collective had conquered. And we won. Not just the battle, but something more important than that. We won the right to be free. We won the right to be equals. We won the future." Sarah nodded. She understood what her father meant. She had spent 5 years working with commanders from other species. She had seen what freedom meant to beings that had been enslaved for generations. She had seen the hope in their eyes when they realized they would never again have to bow to a conqueror. "The collective's last territories have finally been fully integrated into the Free Worlds Coalition," Sarah said. "There is no more collective. It is completely gone." "Good," said, "but remember, our job is not to celebrate their fall. Our job is to build something better. We must make sure that what happened to the collective's worlds never happens again. We must make sure that no species ever has to live in fear of conquest." Sarah and stood together as the Earth rotated below them. The stars shone above them. The galaxy stretched out in all directions, filled with worlds and species and civilizations. Some of them were old and powerful. Some of them were young and still learning. But all of them now knew one truth. Humanity was a species that could not be conquered. Humanity was a species that would fight for freedom. Humanity was a species that the galaxy had to respect as equals. 72 hours after the Overlord had issued his ultimatum, the humans of Earth had answered with complete annihilation. Not the annihilation of Earth, but the annihilation of the greatest empire in the galaxy. Not the destruction of human freedom, but the destruction of the chains that had bound 17 worlds. And from that moment forward, Earth was no longer a world waiting to be conquered. Earth was a world that had changed the future of the galaxy. Earth was home to a species that had proven they would never kneel to any conqueror. Earth was humanity, and humanity had announced itself to the stars as a force that would always choose freedom over slavery, always choose justice over oppression, and always stand as equals among the worlds of the galaxy. Hey, work together. The nations of Earth began to put aside their old conflicts. The wars that had raged for centuries slowly ended. Resources that had been spent on military conflict with other humans were now used for peaceful purposes. Factories that had built weapons to use against other humans began to build ships for space exploration. The second fleet from the collective, the reinforcements that had received modified message, never reached Earth. Instead, they turned around and delivered the message to every collective world. They told the story of how humans had defeated the Overlord. They showed the data that proved it was possible to resist. They brought hope to worlds that had lost all hope. Within 2 years, the collective's territory had shrunk to less than a quarter of what it had been. Within 3 years, the collective ceased to exist as a unified government. The species that made up the collective began to go their own ways. Some of them joined the Liberation Coalition. Some of them became independent. Some of them chose to work with humanity on terms of equality. Received a message from the last leader of the collective. It was a formal surrender, but it was also something more. It was an acknowledgement that the collective had been wrong. The message said that the collective had believed in conquest because conquest was all they understood. But they had seen what humanity could do. They had seen that it was possible to be strong without being cruel. They had seen that it was possible to win without destroying everything. That a human had been asked to address all the species of the galaxy at once. Prepared his speech carefully. He did not want to brag. He did not want to sound arrogant, but he wanted to tell the truth about what humanity was. He decided to tell them about something simple. He decided to tell them about how humans worked together when they mattered. He decided to tell them about how humans could create and also destroy. He decided to tell them that humanity was not a species to be conquered because humans would always choose to fight for freedom. The message was recorded and sent through the galaxy. It reached every planet and every species. It was translated into hundreds of languages, and everywhere it was heard, the response was the same. Humans were different. Humans were dangerous. Humans were a species that would never accept slavery. In the halls of the collective, the remaining leaders faced a truth they had never confronted before. Their empire was crumbling. Their conquered worlds were rising up. Their military forces were being defeated by species that had learned from humanity how to resist. But the collective's downfall was not because of weapons or military force. The collective was falling because of something more powerful. The collective was falling because of hope. The hope that conquered worlds now felt. The hope that came from seeing humans defeat their oppressors. And the explosion. The remaining collective ships tried to jump to and escape, but they could not jump. The quantum encryption viruses that had created had infected their navigation systems. They were trapped in orbit above a world they had tried to conquer. They were trapped above a species they had underestimated. The battle continued for hours. The collective vessels fought with the fury of soldiers who knew they were going to die. But they could not win. They did not have the advantage anymore. They did not have the element of surprise. They did not have the Overlord's confidence. One by one, the collective ships were destroyed. Their shields failed. Their hull breached. Their fires spread. They fell from orbit like falling stars. Humanity's weapons systems guided them toward designated areas of ocean and empty land so they would not hit cities or towns. By the time the sun rose over the Atlantic Ocean, the battle was over. 3 collective cruisers destroyed. The Overlord dead. The fleet that had conquered worlds eliminated. But the victory felt strange to the people of Earth. They had won. They had survived. But they had also killed thousands of alien beings. There was celebration in the streets, but it was mixed with sadness and fear about what would come next. Received reports from the second collective fleet, the reinforcements that had received the modified message, were changing course. They were not coming to help the Overlord anymore. They were running away. They were broadcasting the message from humanity throughout collective space. They were telling every conquered world that resistance was possible. The age of the collective's domination was ending. The age of human equality had begun. We'll not surrender. We will not kneel. We will not accept slavery. If you want this world, you will have to take it. And I promise you this will cost more than you can afford to pay. The Overlord's response came quickly. You are making a mistake. You are a young species. You are not ready to fight. We have conquered worlds much more advanced than yours. You will be destroyed as a punishment for your foolishness. Maybe, said, but we will take you with us. The Overlord did not respond to that. The Overlord did not understand what meant. The Overlord was about to learn.